I like to give a couple minutes at the beginning, but not too long either, because then everybody starts coming half an hour into class. And I try to use our time wisely. So good morning, everybody. Hopefully you had a nice 3-day weekend.
Miss, at 11:15, I have to leave class early because I have an appointment with another professor.
Oh, okay.
All right, thank you.
I'm recording the class, so just make sure that you go back and watch whatever you missed. At what time? 11?
11:15.
Oh, we'll be done before then.
Okay, thank you.
I usually only try to take about an hour at the most, sometimes a little less. I mean, if we were meeting on every B day, that would be different. How do you guys feel about that? Do you wish that we were also meeting on Thursdays? I mean, I know some teachers are giving assignments every day. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't like the everyday assignments.
No? What about meeting every B day? Like, we don't meet on the Thursday B days. And I know that some people do. Is that like too much, or do you feel like it would help you? I try to make the assignments for the week, and then I figure over that week, if you have questions, you can contact me. But if we needed to have class on Thursday, y'all could let me know. I don't know how
I
you
say it
feel.
just depends on the assignment for the week.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like sometimes like some assignments are like harder to where we do probably need the help,
Yeah.
and others are like we can handle.
So maybe some weeks, like when we're working on a research paper, maybe what I'll do is like have an optional Thursday where you can come in and I'll talk in more depth about stuff or answer questions, stuff like that. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
I thought about doing that last week for the paper, but every time I asked for questions, nobody ever sent any, and the papers look good so far. So I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. I know because in the faculty meeting and the department meeting that we had yesterday, some of the teachers were talking about how they make an assignment each day, and like you don't get the assignment until that morning on a B day. So like say if you, for B day class first period, you would get your assignment at the beginning of the day, but then it's due at the end of that day. And I think there's teachers doing that, which is fine, but I feel like if you don't know if there's going to be an assignment or how many assignments are going to come in on any given day, like you're just waiting for them to show up, and then you have to put aside whatever you might have been planning to do that day, like work on your paper or whatever, because those things have a deadline by the end of the day, right?
That's literally what I was like complaining about last week. Like I had like a lab exam, and then I had like a bio exam, and then I had your paper. So I would get like my assignments every day, and I would like finish the little assignments, and I would try to make like my 2 exams and the paper. But every day, like my teachers would put like 2 assignments like for each class, like every day.
But you don't even know what those are until the day starts, right? And then whatever you might have planned,
Yeah, they
See,
don't
that's
post to like the time for the class.
right.
And some of my teachers post like they won't make it like due at 11:59. They'll make it due like at whatever time the class
4 o'clock or something, yeah. Yeah, I got the feeling from that when we were discussing it like in some sessions yesterday. And I was like, well, I could see how maybe some assignments you want them to be done that day, but most assignments you could, I don't know, it's got to be hard to do your time management if you think to yourself, okay, I've got 2 weeks to do this paper, but every time you sit down to do it, there's a posting and you see something popping up, oh, I have to do this other thing because it's due in 3 hours, or it's due an hour from now or whatever. I don't know. I think that has to be hard on you guys. That's why I'm trying to give like weekly deadlines. I'm hoping that that's working out. But then also I feel like if I make the deadlines on the weekends, then people think that they have to work all weekend. You know what I mean? Or you're working on the weekend anyway, so it doesn't matter. I don't know. I'm trying to do it the best way I can think to do it. And to your advantage by giving you the stuff for the week and then giving you the time to work through it. But I can see how that would be really frustrating to have things pop up, and you have to put the things that are long term to the side, right? Well, I guess I'll work on that tomorrow, maybe, or tonight, or no. I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is I want for you guys to feel like if I'm giving you too much or not enough time to complete things, I would like to know that. I know that it's kind of hard and weird to say that to your instructor, but we're in a situation where already I'm streamlining. I mean, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm taking everything down to like the bare minimum basics of what I would need to have to say that this is the course. I'm not giving any extra stuff. Normally, if we were in class, we would probably be doing some like discussion things. We'd be doing some group things to help us work through material. We'd probably be reading more passages in a week because there'd be an assignment each class period that we're meeting, you know, like do this for Thursday, and then Thursday we would meet and do this for next. So I'm literally trying to figure out every week what is essential, because we're just in this weird time. But if it's not working, I would like to know it, and you can find a nice way to say it in an email. But I have students, I teach this other class, so I teach AP, and then I also teach a class called Independent Studies in English, and they're for students who finished English 4 when they were juniors. And most of them are my students from last year because they were in my dual or my AP and they finished English 4 last year. And so I'm hearing from those kids, because they're familiar with me and they feel comfortable saying stuff, I'm hearing from them what's happening in some of their other classes, and I'm trying to get a feel for a better way that I can do it for you guys. So I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is feel free to communicate with me if you feel like there would be a different way. It would be better if there's a deadline that I don't give you enough time for. I feel like the paper was a decent amount of time. Almost all of them came in. I think there were only 2 papers that didn't come in, and those people emailed me with their situations. But I don't know. I want to be sensitive to what's going on with you guys, because I imagine it's like really frustrating. And then how do you complain to an instructor? You can't really. It puts you in an awkward position. So I don't know. At least I can make things better over here. Well, can't tell the teachers how to teach, but I can make it easier for you over here. I'm trying to anyway. All right. Enough about all that. Let's go over to our 8th week module. Hey, week 8. That means that we're halfway through the course. I don't know if that's good, right? I think it's good. We have an accomplishment, a milestone. If it was, if we had a midterm, it would be this week, but we don't. We just have a semester exam. Also, I would tell you ahead of time and give you a study guide a week or 2 in advance on a test like that. So, all right, we're continuing with poetry this week, and we will be looking at analytical skills. For today, you should have looked at the video that I made for you about the 1, 2, 3 analysis process. We're going to talk about that today. And you should have used that process to look at one of the 4 option poems that are all about poetry. And so we're going to continue with that analysis this week and look at some more poems. I didn't make a big reading assignment or anything last week because I knew that you were working on your papers. So this week we're going to have 3 poems to look at and a few things to take notes from the textbook, but I'll talk about that toward the end. A few updates. Just a reminder, this is an A week. We've had 3 A weeks in a row, and this is week 3 of that cycle. They're just trying to equalize the ratio of A and B days, but next week is a B week. So this week we have formatives on just Tuesday and Thursday again, and next week we'll have 3, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. I wanted to talk a little bit about the analysis papers that were due on Saturday. Any feedback on those? Anything you want to tell me about them? How did it go? Do you feel like the process was okay? Anybody want to chime in? You can put a chat. No. Just glad that it's over. I know. There is another paper. It's going to be in the last 6 weeks. It's a research paper. It was easy. Oh, well, I'll keep that in mind when I grade it. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Yeah, so there is another paper. It's longer, and it's a research paper, and we do that one. I think that I will probably assign it early because I have a feeling, I don't know what's going to be the situation when we are getting close to Christmas time, but I feel like around Thanksgiving and between Thanksgiving and Christmas, I feel like, I don't even want to say this out loud, but I feel like they're going to jam you up with projects and things that they didn't finish. Things are going to be due. So I may start the paper early and give a really wide window to work on it so that we have enough time to make sure that it's done, because it's a little bit longer and it is more involved because it's research. But anyway, the analysis papers, the ones I started looking at look good. Most people are following the MLA format. I'm seeing that they're the right length. People are saying some interesting things about the stories. So far so good. The analysis papers do take me a little while to get through. I try to do between 10 and 15 a day. And because they take me about 20 minutes each, and you can do the math on that. If I do more than 10 or 15 a day, I tend to get grumpy. And I just know this about myself. And when I'm grumpy, grades tend to go down. So I try to spare everybody and just try to do like a target 10 or 15 a day. And so usually that means that they'll be done by the middle of next week, a week and a half or so, end of next week. So I will return them to you with feedback. I like to spend a little time. I know that you're not revising them, so I'm not going to be giving you feedback like how could you go back into this essay and fix it up, but I will sort of justify the score on it. So I'll use the rubric and I'll say, this is an 87. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I want to explain why it's not 100. And then I want to also say why it's, like a good solid B, like what was good in the paper. So I'll usually try to give feedback on those things to help you with your future writing. So that does take a little while. And so I do spend my time going through them. I have a program in Google Docs that lets me do voice notes, which makes it a lot quicker over there, but STC insists that you submit everything and I grade it over here, and that Chrome add-on doesn't work with Blackboard, once you know it. So I have to type everything out. And so it will take me a little while, but I will be sending them back to you. I'm assuming that you get some sort of notification when a paper is returned to you. So you should get that back at some point in the next 2 weeks usually. It's just papers take me a little bit longer than other things. I'm sure you understand that. The chat. Getting started was a struggle, yeah. I think that's true with a lot of papers. I'm here to help you through those things though. So I did get a lot of emails. A lot of people emailed me their thesis statement, or I have my thesis statement, could you help me structure the organization? And I was giving people feedback usually that day and giving them ideas. So just keep that in mind. If you could have used that kind of help, maybe in the next paper you can utilize that. But overall, they look pretty good so far. So I've looked at maybe 5 or 6 of them, and I think in one of the other classes. But usually I try to go through and do 10 or 15 a day, and I'll pick like 3 from this class, 4 from this class, so that the people in third 3B don't end up getting theirs all at the end. So I usually try to mix it up. Okay, seniors, same reminders on Texas, Apply Texas and FAFSA. You should be working on those things. Next week, the counselors are going to come in just like they did with Apply Texas to go through FAFSA with anybody who wants to spend some time going through that process. They will sit with you and answer your questions and help you through signing up for financial aid. You do need to sign up for financial aid, even if you don't think you're getting any. I get always some students who are like, well, my parents make too much money. The schools are going to ask, and scholarships are going to ask you for some of the information that you will get on your FAFSA report. So you're going to have to do it, even if you don't get any financial aid, although most students from our school get something from financial aid. So do make sure that you're working on that. Also, I think they have a financial aid night set up for next Tuesday, which is the 20th. I know it was on the calendar. I'll have to verify with the counselors that that's still happening. That's going to be in the evening, because there is a parent portion to FAFSA that your parents have to fill out. So I'll double check that and send you a notification or something. I tend to do my messaging in Google Classroom because I know you get notifications over there. and then I can just do all the classes at once. Just a reminder, if you want me to look at your college admissions essay, that essay is also used for scholarships at most schools. So you do want to make sure that it's in good shape if you want me to go through and give you feedback. A lot of people do that, and it helps them improve their essay. I already talked about that. Senior pictures, seniors, they're going to be taking your senior pictures. I think that date is wrong. I looked at the post that they did. They tweeted it. I want to change the dates on here. I think it's the 22nd and the 23rd. So what that is, that's for the yearbook. So they should have emailed you, seniors, a notification of your appointment time on those days, and it's going to be in the choir room, and they will be set up there with the photographers. You'll show up with your mask, you drive up, you park, you go in, take your picture, and then you go home. So they're still doing that. There is a drape. So what that means is that you'll wear whatever you want to wear in your pictures. You're going to take 2 outfits. One is for you, and you dress up, you wear your tie and your suit or your dress, your outfit, and then they'll switch you into what they want you to wear for the yearbook. So that's usually the bow tie thing, this tuxedo looking thing, or the drape. And then that's how they come out in the yearbook. So
we're taking both of them?
Yeah, they do them at the same time.
Okay.
So you'll show up in whatever you want to take your picture, and you'll take your picture, and then they'll fix you up in, like, the thing for the guys is just that you just goes over the top of what you're wearing, I think. And then the girls, they'll just have you push, like your shoulders down so that your shoulders are showing, and then they put that drape on you with a necklace or something. So then it looks uniform in the yearbook. You all look grown up and like you're ready to face the world. But yeah, that happens at the same time. So if you don't get an email about your time, then you need to take some action. You need to contact Miss Garcia. She's the journalism teacher. If you need her email, you can just send me a quick email and I'll forward it to you. But if you don't have a time in your email, then you can do that. So if you want to come out in the yearbook, that's when they're doing those pictures. Any other questions about that? Usually the seniors have a few questions. Okay, I think that brings us up to date. Oh, there's a quick. There's a chat. I don't keep my chat open. No, ma'am. Okay. I should keep the chat open, but it covers up too much of what I'll just leave it over there on the side, just in case. I didn't put this on the list of updates because last time I put this, they changed it, and everything's kind of in flux right now with when hybrid's going to start. Right now, teachers are supposed to go back to campus next Thursday, the 22nd, and get our rooms in order, all of us, and start hybrid the following Monday, which I think is the 25th, 26th. But I asked about it yesterday in our staff development, and they were saying that the district might do another waiver, which would put us into November. So I don't even want to say anymore when we're going to hybrid. I know that there have been a handful of kids going to school to work in the labs for people who have internet issues. And other than that, nobody's really on campus. Mr. Ramos goes to campus, so he's been telling me, there's like a handful of teachers there, and the administrators, the library people, and a few students in the lab that are socially distanced. So when hybrid starts, it'll either be a week from Monday or sometime in November, but they're waiting on the school board to see if they're going to do another waiver, and I don't know if they are or not. We just stop talking about it because last time we thought we were going back on Monday, and on Friday they told us we weren't. So it's just another added fun quality of life with COVID that you never really know what tomorrow's going to bring. So celebrate every moment. I don't know. Let's get on to the stuff for today. Obviously, there's a formative today and also one on Thursday. The formatives are going quite well. I'm leaving feedback. Sometimes I'll just grade it, but other times there'll be feedback. So if there's feedback, make sure you look through it there. I'm trying to have a little conversation with you about what you're posting. You should have read, now there was a reading assignment, not for last week, but for the week before, to start looking at poetry. So it would have been on week 6 for week 7, but last week's class was full because of the poetry introduction, the poems that I wanted to share with you, and those poetry ones, those slam poems, and I want to be able to, if we go back, we'll be able to paint the wall. I hope so. Class of 2020 didn't get to. It's just sort of like a few people started because we started the week before spring break, and then I gave them the option of doing one on paper and like making it a poster. So I have 2 people who did that, and I'm going to put it up in their spot when I get to school. But, I'm hoping by the end of the year we're more on campus and we can do that. But yeah, Leonel, I hope that we can. I hope that we can. Anyway. So you should have read these 2 parts from the textbook on defining poetry, but like I said, that wasn't for today, that was for last week. I just didn't get a chance to go over them. So I do want to spend a little time today just going through them. Maybe it's a good time to talk a little bit about the semester exam, just so that it starts to be in your awareness. There is a semester exam. It does count for, I think, 25 or 30% of your overall semester grade. That's in December, obviously, and there are terms. All the terms that I've been having you take notes on from the textbook are going to be on that exam. There'll be 2 different ways that that exam shows up, just so that when you're studying over the rest of the semester, you can kind of keep this in mind. The terms will be on the test. I will give you a study guide about 2 weeks before the exam. We'll have all the terms on it that'll be on the test. Anything that's not on the study guide will not be on the test. But besides terminology from short fiction poetry, and we have yet to do the drama unit, there will also be passages on the test that are new to you. So I will give you a new poem that we have not studied in class, and you will have to usually write about that poem. So show me that you can use the skills that we practice. I'll give you a piece of short fiction, and you'll have to write about that piece of short fiction. It'll be new. I'm not going to ask you, what was Ray Arthur Larry Pete's last name in 56-0. I'm not going to ask you to rehash and remember old pieces. It's not about memorizing details from stories and poems that we've already read. It's about using the skills to analyze anything that you are put in front of you. That's a much more powerful skill than recalling details about things that you've already read. So just keep that in mind. You'll have to use these things and prove that you can use them on the exam. And then the terminology will also be on there. There'll be like multiple choice and matching stuff for the terminology. But usually I like to give like a little practice test. With the study guide, I'll give you a list of everything that will be on the test. And then I'll also give you the option of, here's some practice questions. Here's what it's going to look like. Not a complete test, and it's not for a grade, but it's like, if you want to see what the test is going to be like, here's, like an alternate version of the test so you can look at it. Usually I try to do that to help you out the most. Any case, I'm just trying to say that because the things that are in bold in any of the pages that I've assigned you are all eligible to be on the semester exam. So hopefully you've been going through and taking your notes. I want to go through the ones from these reading passages, and then there's a few more that you're going to do for next week, a couple other reading assignments. So this particular one is on defining poetry, and I assigned this 2 weeks ago. So form is a term that you need to know. It has to do with the way poetry looks on the page, different from, like a short story or a play or a novel. We talk about lines and stanzas when we're talking about poems. Probably you already know those terms. Sound is an important feature of poetry. And even I mentioned that last week when I was talking about the fact that poetry has a beauty to the language. There's a musicality to the sound of poetry that we don't have in other pieces of literature. And that's where you get the terms like alliteration, assonance, and consonance. Those are probably terms that you've studied before, probably not last year. Last year was probably more like rhetoric and analyzing arguments. You might have to go back to maybe your pre-AP class or your English 1 or 2 class to remember those terms, but alliteration, assonance, and consonants have to do with repetition of sounds. So we sometimes repeat in poetry the beginning sound in words that are close together, like a T sound, t, or a b sound could imitate a heartbeat. And so poets do those sorts of things to suggest a rhythm and also to suggest sometimes certain sounds. And so we look at those things with poetry. Assonance is when we have the repetition of vowel sounds anywhere in the word. It can be at the beginning, the middle, the end. But if we keep hearing the ooh, ooh, ooh sound, it's because the poet's trying to make it musical. They're trying to make it sound like the repeating sounds are melodic, right? There's a melody to them. And so when we talk about the sound of poetry, that's what we mean. We mean these sort of soothing or jarring sounds that the poet can create by putting certain words together. Consonance is the third one. These are all three related because they're about the repetition of specific sounds. It's just that alliteration is only at the beginning of the word. Assonance, and that's consonant, that's using consonant sounds. Assonance is vowel sounds anywhere in the word, and consonants, C-O-N-S-O-N-A-N-C. I know it sounds like consonant, and they're different. Consonants is the repetition of consonant sounds anywhere in the word. So they're related. It's kind of good to get a handle on the difference between them. Rhyme, of course, we'll be dealing more with rhyme next week, but the rhyme of poems and the sounds that they create also create that melodic sort of element. And of course, we have imagery, which is sort of a literal element, but is important. A lot of poems, most poems use imagery of some sort. So it's to get the visual or the auditory or the tactile to make it seem more apparent to us and make it more vivid. Figurative language, I know you've studied metaphors and similes, and so we look at not just what the poem is saying literally, but also the messages and the comparisons that the poet uses to create them. So that's just a little bit of an overview really on defining poetry in general. Are there any questions about any of that? That's kind of background. Okay. The other thing that I had you read the other week was about reading poetry, and this one has some good tips. I think if there was any page in the poetry section that I was going to put a post-it or like put the corner down so that I could go back to it frequently, it would be this page, because this page has a lot of good tips on how to look at a poem, what to look for, what to think about as you're going through a poem. And I think that this one is a good reference to go back to whenever you have a poetry assignment to read a poem. And we're going to use a method called 1, 2, 3 analysis that you should have watched a video about, and you should have done a 1, 2, 3 analysis on one of the poems for this week. But this one is a good reference because it kind of runs you through all the things to look for in a poem in kind of a neat one page, or like there's a little bit on the next page over here. A little rundown. So it's kind of a good reference page for that. And it's also got some information on active reading. So really this is more of a reference page that I wanted you to be aware of. And I think that you should somehow mark it and use it as you're looking at new poems. By the time you do your semester exam, these strategies and these things to look for should be kind of automatic. And when I give you that poem on the semester exam that's new to you, all these things should sort of kick in, what you're looking for in that poem to be able to write the essay that analyzes it on the test. Theme then, we're going to talk about theme today. Sometimes I call it poetic idea, and in the video that explains the 1, 2, 3 analysis, I do use that term poetic idea, but it's the same thing as theme. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. There's some stuff about active reading, how you can look at a piece in an active way and preview it, how you could annotate. In your book, I think you probably have to use Post-its. If we were in the class, I'd probably give you copies of all the poems so that you could mark them up and highlight and use all your cool colors and whatnot, all your scented markers. But we're not in class, and they haven't invented the computer where I can press a button and send a paper to you. Somebody can work on that for science fair. Anyway, they do walk you through analyzing and making some notes. I do think that annotation is important in some way. Either you're taking notes in your notebook about the poem or doing sticky notes in your book. I think it makes it more active activity in looking at a poem, and it makes it a little easier to follow through a poem if you're making your notes on the side somehow. And so it just walks you through some annotation. Digging is one of the poems that we looked at that I shared with you last week and talked a little bit about, and this one kind of walks through how you might question it and notice things, and all these annotations are about what you would maybe jot down if you were trying to figure out a poem. So that section is pretty self-explanatory, but I kind of wanted you to walk through it so that you could see this page as a resource, but then also, you know, different ways that you could be involving yourself with your reading. So are there any questions on this chapter? Anything you want me to talk about a little bit more?
No questions.
No questions, okay. Then that means I'm going to switch over and talk about the 1, 2, 3 poetry analysis a little bit. I'm going to turn on the document camera. And I want you to go in your notes to where you did your notes on the 1, 2, 3 poetry analysis. And you should have watched a video where I went through, it's kind of a long video, it's like 30 minutes long, where I went through the 1, 2, 3 process, and then I took a poem and completely did the analysis as an example. And you should have watched that. I know the 30 minutes is a little bit long, but I'm introducing a new process to you, and I wanted to take the time to go through that poem. It's that Emily Dickinson poem about the snow. And so that video takes you through that. I don't know about you, but usually with long videos, I make them go faster. Person sounds like a mouse or whatever, but hopefully you got the idea of the 1, 2, 3 analysis, which I find the most efficient way to look at a poem. I'm going to go through it in a little more depth right now, or just to refresh your memory, because it's kind of new, and I think that even if you watch the video, we could go through a little more detail about that. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the document camera here, and not that one, that one. Okay. So push this way. Okay. All right. So if you have your notes already from the video, then you can I'm just going to go through them. But if you didn't happen to make notes from the video, you're going to want to do this. This week, there's an assignment that is going to ask you to do the 1, 2, 3 analysis on 3 poems about night. So you're going to have to put this into action this week. You're going to have to take the 1, 2, 3 poetry analysis and put it to work. So if you already have this, it'll be a good reinforcement. If you don't have this, you should have watched that video before class today, but I'm going to go over it right now so that you can start to get the hang of it. So the 1, 2, 3 poetry analysis is something that I invented. There are a lot of fancy ways to look at poems, but I think the 1, 2, 3 is the most efficient. Basically, I'm going to ask you to read each poem 3 times. So each time we look for something different. You all know that the more times you read something, the more it makes sense to you. I'm sure you've had something over your career in high school that didn't make sense the first time you read it, and so you went back and reread it and got more information from it, whether it was, you know, your history textbook or, you know, a poem in class. But the more you read something, the more it will make sense to you, and you have to work with it in different ways. So each time that we read the poetry, the poem using this process, we're looking for something different. The first time we read it, we just want to look for what I call the basics, right? We want to look for who is the speaker. You know, what do we know about the speaker? How can we characterize it? Is it a first person speaker? Is it a third person speaker? What's going on with that situation? I want to look for vocab or allusions, like references that I don't know. Sometimes poets will throw in a reference to some Greek god or, you know, some other time in history, And I don't get to skip over it because in poetry, everything's compacted. We talked about that last week. So everything is there for a purpose. And I can't just skip something that I'm not familiar with. Number one, how would you ever get familiar with stuff if you didn't look up stuff that you came across that you didn't know? But also, the meaning of the poem will be lost a little bit on you. A little bit of that meaning will be like mysterious to you because you didn't look up that allusion or that reference. So any words that are used that you don't know the meaning, or any references, you have to stop and look them up. Do you have to spend an hour studying them? No, but you need to have a working idea of why the poet is referencing this character from mythology or whatever. So you can make a note about that, but you need to take the time to do that work. You need to also look for shifts. I have to enunciate that very carefully. Shifts in the poem. On a first read, you can look and see, oh, well, at the beginning, they're basically doing this, and then halfway through, it changes to this. So you want to look for key clues like, you know, coordinating conjunctions like but or for or so. All of those will signal that there's a shift. If the first two stanzas are going on about the fall leaves and then you have but, well, obviously the poem is switching gears, and that's something to look at. You want to start figuring out, what is it shifting from and what is it shifting to? So, well, they were, it was a young speaker and now it's an old speaker. Or they were talking about autumn and now they're talking about winter. You know, whatever it's shifting from and to, on a basic read, we want to figure that out. All right. After you do that and you make some notes about those things, then you can move on to reading at the second level. Now, this is going to be a little more in depth, obviously, because you've already taken care of the basics over here. So on the second level, you're going to read for the figurative elements. So you're going to look and see the metaphors, the symbols, all of those sorts of things. And you want to start thinking about how the poet, symbol, you know, simile, imagery, all that stuff, how those things are figuring into the poem itself. Most of the basic stuff is going to be in the first reading is on the literal level. What is this poem about? What is happening? Who's talking? What does this word mean? How are things shifting around? All of that's really on a function, basic function level. But then we move into the figurative realm and we start thinking, all right, well, this poet is using a metaphor to talk about the relationship between father and son in this poem. And that metaphor, I have to kind of work that out. I have to spend some time figuring out why that is being compared to, you know, the tide at the sea or whatever. So I have to spend some time working just on those figurative elements, if that makes sense. I'm going to look also at structure. So I'm going to look a little more in depth at what's happening before and after the shift and see how that figures into the figurative. Sometimes the beginning of a poem is all about the imagery, but then there's a shift and it ends with an extended metaphor. I want to notice that sort of thing. So all of this, I have to start working on what's the meaning. Now, the important thing here is not just identifying these things. In other words, you're not just labeling simile, personification, metaphor. The people who do the best with their poetry assignments will be looking beyond that for the effects. I mean, you've been labeling stuff in poetry since middle school. Oh, there's a simile, there's another simile, we can find them. But the question now is, why is that being used? What is the point that the author's trying to make, right? Why is this dog being given human qualities? Why is this relationship being compared to the sea? And those are the notes that are going to elevate your work on poetry. It's not about how many metaphors you can find. It's not, you know, like an egg hunt. It's how much insight can you get from why the poet is making that comparison. So if your notes are in this area, I think that you'll be doing the top level work for this course, for the poetry. If you're just trying to label stuff, Labeling stuff is a pretty basic skill. This is hard. I'm not going to say it's easy, especially with poetry. Lots of times people tell me, oh, when we go over it in class, it makes sense to me, but when I'm at home reading it, I'm just totally confused. Well, that's when you go back to that page that we put a sticky note on in the textbook. That's where you rely on the 1, 2, 3 poetry analysis. This is a process, and you're going to get there. You try to push yourself to think about the effects that those devices are giving off. Why did the author use those things? All right, and then you can get to the third level, the deep level of poetry, which is the meaning. Looks like almost the same color, but it's green. I'm trying to differentiate the colors on here. So eventually the goal is to get to the meaning in the text. We aren't really done looking at the poem until we figure out the message that the poet is trying to convey to us. You can call that a theme. I call it sometimes the poetic idea, but it's the same thing. It's sort of like the life lesson that the poet is trying to teach about the topic. And sometimes that's hard to see, but if you've done enough work in step 1 and 2, then you should be able to do step 3. And you should be able to say, well, the poet's saying this about the poem, about love, or the poet's trying to make this observation about the parent-child relationship. And it's something that we all need to learn about life. If this is hard for you to get to the meaning, I'm going to give you a little tip, a little trick. You can think about topics or subjects, as they call it in your textbook. So you can say to yourself, you know what, I'm not sure what the life lesson is in this poem. It's hard for me to articulate that, but this poem is definitely about hatred. Or this poem is definitely about, you know, friendship. Or death, or like whatever the poem is about. And then I can ask myself, like, that is not a theme or meaning. That is just, this is what the poem is basically about. It's about autumn. It's about, you know, my pet, whatever. But you can ask yourself, what is the poet trying to express about hatred? What is the poet trying to teach us about friendship? What is the poet trying to help us understand about death? About the topic. I know I'm going off the page here. And when I answer that question, then I can get this life lesson. Oh, well, he's trying to say you better tell people that you love them before they die because life is, you know, has its limits. So you can, this is a little trick that you can use to get a really good poetic idea. You want to avoid cliches. You don't want to say, oh, well, you know, what's a good cliche that people use a lot? Life is hard. I could put that in almost every poem, right? Like most of the poems are about that. But maybe life is hard in the sense that there is hatred in our society. Well, what is the poet trying to get us to understand about hatred? I go back to my notes from steps 1 and 2, and I say, oh, okay, well, he's trying to get us to understand that hatred is something that society has to work together to overcome, or you know, like whatever the poem is saying. So this is a little trick that you can use to help you get to that poetic idea if you struggle with that. Maybe you don't struggle with that in some poems, but then all of a sudden is going to come a poem from the 17th century and you're going to be like, oh, I don't know how to get any meaning out of that poem. Well, we can. We just have to practice it. So that's the 1, 2, 3 poetry analysis. If we can get through all those stages, then we can say we understand a poem. If we get to stage 3 and I can't do this, I can't even do the topic trick, then I need to go back and do more. I didn't do enough here. I need to go back into the poem and do more figurative work, think more about the metaphors, and so on until you can get to the meaning and work on that. Hopefully that makes sense. Any questions about the 1, 2, 3 analysis? It's like the short version from the video. Okay. Well, hopefully that makes sense because I want to check and see how you did with your first poetic idea or your first theme. You were supposed to read and do a 1, 2, 3 poetry analysis for the first time on one of 4 poems. I gave 4 poems, they're all about poetry, but I just wanted you to pick one. And you were supposed to kind of go through that 1, 2, 3 process. And I want to see how you did with that. Sometimes I will check your homework. It's going to start happening more frequently now that we're moving through the semester. So I want to check it today on a Padlet. If you click right here where it says Padlet, it should open up the Padlet that I set up, and you'll see the 4 poems that you had the option to choose from right here. And I want to give you a few minutes right now to go to the Padlet. And I want you to go under whichever poem you looked at for homework and click the plus. And I want you, now this is not going to post for everybody. It's only going to post for me to see it. I want to see, number 1, did you do your homework? Number 2, did you get the idea of the 1, 2, 3 analysis, and did you get yourself to some sort of idea about the poem, some sort of theme? So what I want you to do is open a tile and put in your name, and then type out your poetic idea that you came up with for that poem. And it's not going to show up for everybody to see. I just want you to put it in there. I think that it's a good time for you to realize that I'm asking you to do assignments. I'm not giving you fluffy things that you don't need to do. Everything that I'm asking you to do has a purpose. So I'm checking to see if you're doing the things that I'm asking you to do. So you should be able to very easily just type in the poetic idea that you came up with for your poem because you were supposed to already have done that. So I'll give you a couple minutes to go ahead and type those in. If you did not look at a poem for today, what are you doing with your life? I'm just kidding. What are you doing? What are you doing in this class? You have to work. You have to do the assignments. You can still post it later today, but the top scores are going to go to the people who can drop one in there right now for me because they did what they were supposed to do. In class, I would call on you. If we were sitting in my classroom, I would say, you in the back with your looking over to the side and not looking at me in my face. What's your poetic idea for this poem? Share it with us, please. Bring it up to the camera. Bring it up to the camera and let's see your analysis that you did on your paper. Yeah, I do that. Yeah, it's like showing your work in math on the board or whatever. So take a minute. I'm going to mute my microphone, and I want you to drop in your poetic idea if you can. If you can't, you could try to do one. If you read the poem but you just didn't do the poetic idea, try to get it in there. If you didn't, then you're gonna have to go back and do it sooner rather than later so that I know that you were working on your assignment. make sure that you were at least aware that I'm going to officially assign it next week, but we don't have a paper to write with poetry. Instead, it's going to be a video project where you're going to go through and analyze a poem on a video. It's not going to be necessary for you to like show your face like I always do every day when we're having our meetings. But you will have to record your voice. So you're going to walk us through a poem, and there's a twist to the assignment, and you can, I put the assignment here so just so that you could start to, in the back of your mind, be thinking about the little project that we're going to do with poetry. And I'll assign it next week, and I'll talk about the details of it and so on. I think the first part of it's due on the 31st. There's kind of two parts to it. There's a video that you're making and posting, and then there's where you're going to go in and look at two classmates' videos and do some work with those videos. So there's kind of two parts. I think that's later the following week that it's due. So that's coming up, and I like to kind of tell you stuff that's coming up so that it's not all of a sudden, you know, a big burden on you. I want to kind of, if I can tell you ahead of time something's going to be happening, then you can start working it into your plans. So you might want to just look at that assignment a little bit, and I'll go through it in more detail next Tuesday, but I'll put some PDFs on here. I'm seeing in the chat that people want me to, I'll just put the PDF that way. If you do have a printer and you prefer to print it out and, I don't know, get all your pencils and cool markers and all of your highlighters, you can do that. Otherwise, you can just do Post-its in your book or do it on a piece of notebook paper in your notebook. But do have a written, I put it in big letters right here like I was yelling, do have a written version of your 1, 2, 3 analysis for those 3 poems. They're short. All right, that's all for me for today. If you've posted your poetic idea on the Padlet and you don't have any more questions about the material for next week, then I'm pretty much done. Anybody, anything? No? All right, you can sign off then. If you have a question, you can stick around. Otherwise, have a good week. See you next Tuesday.